As the 100-day mark came and went without any major legislative wins, the president explained to our John Dickerson the level of disappointment he feels towards House Republican leaders as they continue to sell a revised version of their health care bill.
You said you were disappointed in the Republicans in Congress. Why?
Well, disappointed. They're friends of mine. They're really special people, whether it's Freedom Caucus or Tuesday or Thursday or Let's Go Have a Drink, that group. They're great people. I know them all. And I can honestly say, we've got a lot of them, I can honestly say I don't dislike any of them. I like almost all of them a lot. And, you know, we have some votes that have never voted positively. But now we're the governing party. Before it didn't matter. They could vote no, and it wouldn't matter because President Obama was going to veto everything. And they didn't have the Senate. Now we have the Senate, the House, and the White House. But these are great people. And I think you're going to see the Republican Party really come together.
Cameron Joseph is on Capitol Hill. He's Washington bureau chief for the New York Daily News. So, Cameron, you heard the president there say congressional Republicans are great people. What is your sense, though, of how far apart Republicans in Congress and the president remain on issues like health care and tax reform?
Well, a couple of reasons. First of all, these are all pretty complicated things. They're not easy to reform in the first place. Took Democrats, as President likes to point out, 17 months to get Obamacare done in the first place, and you haven't seen tax reform in 30 years. Now, given that difficulty, they're not exactly knocking it out of the park. We haven't seen President Trump be able to be consistent with what he wants with his messaging. I think we finally see more of a focus on health care at the moment, although they jumbled that up and they kind of bollocks that up in the 100 days approach when he started pushing tax reform right in the middle of them getting close on health care. Now, House Republicans think they're getting pretty dang close to being able to get health care bill out of the floor, get it through, but they still are a few votes short. And all of a sudden, the White House is talking again like they think they have the votes they're starting to demand a vote this week. Folks I'm talking to around here today didn't exactly sound like they were quite ready to get there.
So that was going to be my next question for you, though. Was there still a sense of momentum when it comes to health care?
Well, they all keep talking about a sense of momentum. I honestly think that they did make some progress last week. You saw an agreement that brought the conservative members of the House Freedom Caucus aboard, but there's a lot of moderates that are still flinching at this bill, and we're seeing more people even come out today, including some folks who aren't exactly from super swingy districts. Billy Long from Missouri, for one, saying they're not exactly crazy about this bill, they're not going to vote for it. And so they're not quite there. I think that there's a possibility they might get there, but the idea that, Gary Cohn said this morning that they're probably going to have a vote this week. Kevin McCarthy said something similar over this weekend. It's looking like that may or may not happen at this point.
I want to play another clip from John Dickerson's interview with the president. He was asked about the tax blueprint. The president told another outlet that he's willing to raise the U.S. gas tax to fund infrastructure. Let's go ahead and listen to the clip.
Tax plan came out this week. It's got some big deficit numbers. You've said that's going to be made up by growth.
Well, not only growth. It's going to be made up by better trade deals. Okay. It's going to be made up by many different reciprocal tax. As an example, we have countries where if we make a product and we send it to that country, they charge us 100% tax. If they make the same product and send it to us, we charge them nothing. You think that's smart? It's not. We're going to come up with reciprocal taxes and lots of other things on those countries.
What about infrastructure? When is that going to happen?
We're going to do infrastructure very quickly. We've got the plan largely completed, and we'll be filing it over the next 2 or 3 weeks, maybe sooner.
So, Cameron, beyond that, what more could he realistically try to wrap in with tax reform? And is 2 to 3 weeks a realistic timeline?
They say that campaigning is poetry and governing is in prose, and that almost sounded like free jazz to me. He hits so many different things in such a brief period, most of which have zero chance of passing Congress. Republican control, Democratic control, full stop. The gas tax is never getting through Congress. It's deeply unpopular. He's claiming that he's going to have an infrastructure package. I think it's kind of like when he claimed 10 days ago that he was going to have a tax plan, and then you saw a bunch of folks at the White House kind of rush to regurgitate a tax plan that they'd had on the campaign trail already with even less detail than they already had. So, it's one of those I'll believe it when I see it on a lot of these things.
Well, the president has also signaled that he is looking at bringing back a version of a Glass-Steagall law that required the separation of consumer and investment banking. Any sense of what that updated approach might be and who it would impact?
I think it's kind of moot because it ain't going to happen. That's something that most Republicans, especially conservative and pro-Wall Street Republicans, deeply dislike. I mean, this is something that Bernie Sanders also ran on. I mean, this is one of those things that you might actually get some Democratic buy-in. But after the Wall Street collapse and the recession of 08-09, Democrats couldn't get this done, and President Obama backed off. Some of his advisors were pushing for this in the first place. With 59 votes, at one point 60 votes in the Senate, the idea that they couldn't get this done, and now somehow with the Republican Congress, Donald Trump is going to make this happen when he hasn't offered a single specific about this entire plan. I can't see it.
Well, Cameron, I want to get your impression of Congress's $1 trillion budget deal made Sunday night. Some of President Trump's key policies are not included. Who do the winners and losers appear to be in this deal?
Yeah, well, biggest for the Democrats, and this was their line in the sand, no money for the border wall. And that's a loss for President Trump. This is something that he insisted on. And frankly, Democrats and Republicans up on the Hill worked pretty steadily for the last month to get an agreement. Democrats laid out what they're calling poison pills amendments, basically saying, if there's border wall money in this, if they screw with Obamacare, if they gut Planned Parenthood, that it was a non-starter for them, and you need Democratic votes to pass this. So, Democrats and Republicans kind of came at this equally. There's money that President Trump asked for military spending, some money for border security stuff, although not nearly as much as he was requesting. But basically, Democrats and Republicans ignored the president on this, and he got some of what he wanted, but he really didn't get a lot of what he wanted. And he promised throughout the campaign that he would not be raising the deficit, and this has a lot more new spending, which is the opposite of what he called for.
Finally, Cameron, this is something you've written about. We've seen the president facing some controversy after inviting the president of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte, to the White House and saying he'd be honored to meet with North Korea's leader. What message did those comments send?
Well, I think it's been fascinating. He really goes out of his way to praise a lot of dictators around the world, and you've seen this with Russia, obviously. You've seen this with Turkey, where he has some financial interests. What I wrote about today, looking at the Philippines, where Duterte isn't just the run-of-the-mill leader, a dictator. He's killed about 7,500 of his own people since he came into office for being drug users. He's supported these extra-legal killings and basically roving bands of cops and sometimes not cops massacring people. And President Trump was going out of his way to praise him and even mentioned his crackdown on drugs as something that was kind of a positive. And Trump has business interests there. Duterte actually named as U.S. envoy a business partner of Trump's who's building the Trump Tower in Manila right now. It's just about to open. On top of that, I found out today there's some patents pending, both from that company for Trump, and Ivanka Trump has 2 patents out in the Philippines. So obviously, there's some serious concerns about conflicts of interest here. And when I asked Sean Spicer about it, he basically poo-pooed it and said that they were doing everything they were supposed to be doing. And so this is kind of a pattern of them just not really caring whether they at least give the appearance of conflicts of interest. And so far it hasn't caught up to them, but it certainly isn't helpful.
That's interesting. And Rodrigo Duterte's supporters would say, well, he was democratically elected and he does enjoy high approval ratings, but certainly some of the issues that you raised are raising questions among some here in the U.S. Cameron Joseph, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.